Welcome to Remote Learning Lesson 23. Today's lesson is using number lines to add fractions. The LEQ for today's lesson is, how can models be used to add fractions with like denominators? Today's objective is, I can use number lines to add fractions. Let's begin. Problem number 1. The problem is 1/3 plus 1/3. Right now we're going to draw a number line and split it into thirds. We're going to start with 0/3, end at 3/3, which is our one whole, and in the middle we have 1/3 and 2/3. If you notice, above the 0/3 I have the whole number 0, and above the 3/3 I have the whole number 1. The direction is, on the number line, show how to add each 1/3 with arrows designating lengths. So start at 0/3 and make one hop, because you're counting by ones, 1/3. And if you're doing 1/3, you're going to do another third. So start at that 1/3, and your second arrow is going to go to the 2/3. So that's you adding 1/3 plus 1/3, and your final answer is 2/3. Express this as an addition sentence and as a multiplication equation and solve. Our addition sentence is going to be 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3. And our multiplication equation is going to say 1/3 times 2 equals 2/3. Or you can write it opposite and write 2 times 1/3 equals 2/3. Remember, multiplication is commutative property, so you can write it either direction. Let's move on to problem number 2. In problem number 2, we're looking for 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So we're going to be expecting to see 3 hops on this number line because there are 3 things happening. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So the first thing we need to do is we need to draw that number line and split it into fourths. Lucky for you, you have the number line drawn for you. All you need to do is fill in the numbers below. It starts with 0/4 and it ends at 4/4, so we need to fill in the ones in the middle. Let's add a 1/4, a 2/4, and a 3/4. If you look at 2/4, 2/4 can get reduced, and we could have called that 1/2. Right now, we're just going to leave it as 2/4, but just know that 2/4 could be reduced and be a 1/2. If you look above the 0/4, it's going to say 0, whole number, and then above the 4/4, you're going to have the whole number 1. On the number line, we're going to show how to add each of those 3/4 with arrows designating the lengths. You're going to start at 0, and you're going to hop over to the 1/4. That's one hop. Now you're going to do the next fourth. So you're going to start at the 1/4, and you're going to move to the 2/4. That's the second fourth being represented. To represent the third fourth, we're going to start at the 2/4 and end at the 3/4. So 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. Let's show this as addition and multiplication. As an addition sentence, we're going to simply write 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. And for our multiplication equation, we're going to say 1/4 times 3 equals 3/4. Or we're going to say the opposite, 3 times 1/4 equals 3/4. Remember that commutative property. Let's move on to problem number 3. Problem number 3 shows 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 3 plus 1/8. This is a little bit different than the other two because the other two problems had the same number going straight through, and this one does not. Let's see how this is set up. First, we're going to have that number line split into eighths. You have a number line, it's split into eighths. It starts at 0/8 and it ends at 8/8. You're going to fill in the rest. You're going to fill in 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, and 7/8. Notice above the 0/8 is a 0. Notice above the 8/8 is a 1. And just remember, there's a couple of things that could have been reduced. You could have reduced 2/8, divide both top and bottom by 2, and you would have gotten 1/4. You could have reduced 4/8, divide both top and bottom by 4, and you would have got 1/2. You could have reduced 6/8, divide both top and bottom by 2, and you would have ended up with 3/4. Right now, we're going to leave them be. On the number line, though, we're going to show how to add each 3/8 and that 1/8. So we're going to skip 3/8 twice and add 1/8. So let's start with the 3/8 first. We're going to start at 0/8 and we're going to move over 3 spaces. So it's going to land on 3/8. From 3/8, we're going to move over 3 spaces again, and that's going to land at 6/8. And then from 6/8, we're only going to move 1 space. So we're finally going to land at 7/8. Circle 7/8, and that's our final answer. Let's go ahead and put this in addition and multiplication. The addition sentence that we're going to have is 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 1/8 equals 7/8. And of course, you could have written that any way you wanted. You could have written it with 1/8 first plus the 2 3/8, or you could have put a 3/8, a 1/8, and then a 3/8 afterwards. I just chose 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 1/8 equals 7/8. Our multiplication equation is 3/8 times 2, since there are 2 3/8, plus an additional 1/8 equals 7/8. Again, you could have written the 1/8. Problem number 4. Problem number 4 has 2 halves plus 2 halves plus 2 halves. Let's set this one up. Draw a number line and split it into halves. Label it from 0 halves to 6 halves. Here's our number line, 0 halves to 6 halves, and we'll fill in the rest. 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, and 5 halves. We have all of our halves in. If you notice, above 2 halves, there's a 1. And above 4 halves, there's a 2. Above 3 halves, there's a 6. And if you notice, right after you get past 2 halves, you have improper fractions. That means those answers, those numbers could have all been mixed numbers, but we're just writing them as halves, so we're writing them in improper fractions. On the number line, we're going to show how to add 2 halves with arrows designating length. So we're going to go from 0 to 2 halves for the first one, from 2 halves to 4 halves for the second one, and from 4 halves to 6 halves for the third one. And we're going to circle 6 halves because that's our answer. And the way we're going to express this is 2 halves times 3 equals 6 halves. You could have written it 2 halves plus 2 halves plus 2 halves, but that's what it was written in the beginning. So we wrote it a different way, which is 2 halves times 3 equals 6 halves. And the way we're going to change our improper fractions to mixed numbers is we're going to simply divide. We're going to divide our numerator by our denominator. 6 divided by 2. And 2 goes into 6 evenly, 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. So we're actually going to get a whole number answer. And if you simply looked at your number line, you would have noticed that 6 halves actually represents the number 3 right above it. Now it is your turn to complete your problem set and application problem independently. Please complete both and send me a picture. You can text it, email it, send it through the Remind app, or send it to me through Google Classroom. Just remember that in order for you to get credit for this lesson, you need to send me your picture. I can't wait to see your work, and I can't wait to see you again. Bye, boys.